For the past few winters, millions of blackbirds have been gathering in this Missouri field almost every evening, a phenomenon that's absolutely fantastic to experience in person. This site was unknown to the birding community until we discovered it in January 2020. In this video, we'll tell you why it's important, how we found it, and what it has to tell us about the relationship between land management and bird behavior. So join us in visiting this amazing Central Missouri blackbird roost here on Ozark Outsider.
In the early evening, this valley is quiet, but as the shadows lengthen, the first streams of blackbirds begin to arrive, growing into a torrent of birds half an hour later. The birds often gather first in the surrounding trees, creating the illusion that the forest has been airbrushed with black leaves. Streams can arrive from multiple directions, funneling huge numbers of birds into the area. This is just a short segment from a 9-minute clip I filmed within a dense, unbroken flow that lasted close to an hour. Masses of birds rise, swirl, and settle in pulsating patterns. Hundreds of thousands of wings beating together create the audible impression of surf breaking on a beach. These are primarily red-winged blackbirds, though common grackles do occur in lower numbers. Both species are blackbirds native to North America. We've also observed smaller flocks of European starlings, though taxonomically speaking, these aren't blackbirds. As the light fades, the birds begin moving into the valley's tall grass, with a dense vertical packing reminiscent of urban high-rises. You could be forgiven for assuming this is primarily a story of nature, of a pristine or restored native grassland hosting a natural phenomenon only tangentially related to humans. But this would be surprisingly, utterly mistaken.
As fall transitions into winter, blackbirds begin congregating in larger flocks, their focus changing from individual nesting to collective survival. During the day, flocks forage for food together, often traveling many miles to feed on waste grain in agricultural fields. At night, they congregate in overnight roost sites able to host even larger numbers of birds. In late 2019, I was doing research for a series of articles on birds occurring in big numbers for the Columbia Audubon Society newsletter. I consulted data from eBird as well as reports on Missouri's birding listserv, and in the process I learned of accounts of huge blackbird flocks in central Missouri, including a report from January 2019 that described a truly massive river of blackbirds at dusk. Curious whether that was a one-time thing or part of a pattern, we visited the flat agricultural area of north central Missouri where the report had been made, about a year after the original report. In late afternoon, we viewed trumpeter swans while watching for blackbirds. As both the sun and temperature began to drop, independent flocks of blackbirds coalesced into two continuous rivers of blackbirds that streamed from horizon to horizon, drifting back and forth across the sky like smoke as the steady flow headed south. We hopped in our car and followed one stream south as best we could, peering out the window like storm spotters chasing a tornado. 10 miles south, we found multiple streams of blackbirds converging along a river valley, but there was no safe roadside pull-off and dusk was falling. Back at home, we consulted maps and aerial photos to identify a more suitable viewing area. Then we returned a few weeks later. We were overwhelmed by the sights and sounds of enormous rivers of blackbirds collecting in denser concentrations than we'd ever witnessed before. We shared this find with the birding community, which led to visits by dozens of others. Non-birders and birders alike were wowed by this phenomenon, including some of the state's top birders. These visits, combined with back-of-the-envelope calculations, resulted in a consensus that this valley was consistently hosting congregations in the range of 2 million blackbirds per night. We did some additional research and published a peer-reviewed report on the roost discovery and context in the Quarterly Journal of the Missouri Birding Society.
Why are so many blackbirds gathering to overwinter in this area? One clue may come from land use patterns. We built this map of primary land use in the area, overlain by 10 and 20 mile radius circles from the roost site. Brown indicates cropland, primarily corn and soy, while green indicates forest and yellow hayfields. The roost site sits at a convenient transition between primarily forested and agricultural landscapes, providing the birds with clear options for foraging depending on conditions. But why this specific location? One clear possibility is the tall grass present in this valley, but what makes this special? This isn't native prairie grass, nor any kind of habitat restoration effort on public land. Rather, it's miscanthus, a non-native perennial grass grown for biomass for use in biofuels or sometimes as pet food filler. Miscanthus is fairly new in Missouri, and this field, one of only a few of its kind in the region, was planted in the mid-2010s. However, it seems to provide an excellent proxy for the sort of tall, native wetland vegetation that blackbirds tend to like, such as reeds, cattails, and giant cutgrass. Starting in the 1800s, native wetlands and tall grass prairies declined precipitously in Missouri as European settlers drained marshes and plowed under grasslands, dramatically altering ecosystems. Yet given this human-driven degradation of a native ecosystem, it's fascinating that a different sort of agriculture seems to have created a proxy for a habitat desperately desirable to these birds. There's little natural or native about this landscape, yet it could provide a peek into the past, when such birds might have gathered in extensive creek-bottom wetlands every winter after foraging across the prairies.
Or are these mass concentrations themselves unnatural, the reaction of these species to widespread habitat loss, or the rise in easy food available in wintertime cornfields?
Other patterns may also be in play. In the 1960s, large blackbird roosts were primarily reported in the American South, shown here in blue. However, our analysis of more recent data from eBird, shown here in yellow, suggests that large winter concentrations, potentially indicative of roost sites, are shifting north and west. It's not clear what's driving these shifts. Climate change? Land management practices? Our research found reports of large blackbird concentrations at various locations throughout Missouri from the 1960s onward, but these don't seem to have been studied or monitored consistently. This location is on private land, though it can be viewed from public roads, so it has a lower profile than public lands like wildlife refuges. As of January 2023, the miscanthus here hadn't been harvested since we began monitoring the site in January 2020, perhaps reflecting a decline in the price and demand for this experimental crop. How would the birds react if it suddenly vanished?